Hey, good day. Welcome to another episode of the Typewriter video series. This is Joe Van Cleve. Today I want to talk about a typewriter repair job that I did on one of my typewriters, the Olympia SF, and a little special extra after that. But before I get into the Olympia SF, the previous video I did, which was episode 67, I think, it was about a repair that I did to my Smith Corona Silent Super using Ted Monk's Typewriter Repair Bible as a reference for fixing it, and I described all the adjustments I did to it to get it in good shape. I forgot to mention one other thing I did, and I'm going to just briefly cover that right now. So after I had fixed everything in this typewriter, I noticed I wanted to check the touch. There is adjustments in the manual for the touch, and if you remember, on the Smith Corona Silence, they have the touch adjustment is a little lever right here under the ribbon cover, and it goes from from low, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to high. And according to the manual, there is this little bar right here where the lever of the touch adjustment comes up through a slot. And this bar, there are two screws, one here and one here. These screws are for adjusting the touch between the left and the right side of the keyboard. And what I noticed in testing it was the left side of the keyboard, the keys felt slightly stiffer than the right side. And so what I did was I loosened this screw on the left side by about a quarter turn until both left and right sides felt even. Then what I did is I backed off both screws equally about another maybe quarter to a half a turn. So what I've done essentially is I've changed the entire range of the touch on this touch selector to make the entire range of it a little bit easier. Now you don't want to soften it up too much, because if you do that, then eventually if you're a really fast typist, the keys are apt to start bouncing or something when they hit the ribbon, and it could cause other problems if it gets too loose. But basically I just lightened up the touch a little bit more than it was, and I've been really happy with this Smith Corona Silent Super ever since. So that's this. Now let's get on to the subject of this video, which is the Olympia SF. Okay, I've had this little Olympia SF for probably over a month now. I got it at a local thrift store, and I love the looks of it, and it has a nice solidly built feel to it. The keys have a really nice feel, even though there's no adjustment to the touch. Overall, a really neat machine. I really like it, and I covered it in a previous video, a little review of it right after I got it. But it had one mechanical problem that I had sort of resigned myself to the idea that I wasn't going to be able to fix because of the complexity of the way the carriage is built and all the parts in there. It just didn't look like I could easily take it apart to work on it. And that problem was the line spacing selector, which has 3 positions plus an upper position for defeating the ratcheting so the platen turns continuously without any clickies. Anyways, the problem it had was when you put it in the single line spacing position, it would click 3 times instead of 2, which means it's a space and a half. And that third click was not a full click, so it would go almost 1.5 spaces, and then when you started typing about a third of the way over on your line, it would finally drop down into that third position, and that would cause the line spacing to be uneven. And I had resigned myself to the fact that I would simply do a carriage return and then back click the platen 1 click with the knob to get into my single line spacing. And I kind of got in the habit of using this typewriter with that way. Well, last week, after I was successfully able to do some repairs to my Smith Corona Silent Super, it emboldened me to maybe go back and look at this machine again. Now, I don't have a manual for the Olympia. These were not as common. In fact, this Olympia SF is an early model. The later versions in the 1960s were more angular and kind of flat and boxy looking and squarish looking. This is kind of the late 50s, I think. Anyways, so let me show you what I found on this machine, what I did to fix the problem. So I'm going to get this set up so we can see the parts a little bit better. Okay, I have the machine sitting on its back, so this is the left side of the platen. Here is the carriage return line feed lever. This lever here is the spacing, line spacing selector, and the little red marks are the line spacing settings, single, 1.5, and double line spacing. And then there's this bracket here with a little roller on it and 2 screws that hold it together. On the rubber platen itself, there's a geared sprocket connected to the left side of the platen roller itself. And that's what does the line spacing or the ratcheting. And then on the right side of the platen, what we have is the carriage lever, or the carriage knob, I should say, on the right side has a set screw for loosening the knob. And then on the right side of the platen here, there is 2 other set screws in this little slot here. You can turn the platen to get to both of them, one there and one right here. And of course on the left platen knob, it also has a set screw for taking the left platen knob off, okay? So what I noticed about this machine was that if I took both platen knobs off by loosening their little set screws and pulling them off, the shaft underneath there that they connect to, first of all, the shaft has a flat spot on both ends for that little set screw, but the shaft goes through the platen itself, through the middle of the rubber platen roller. And if you loosen the 2 set screws on the right side of the platen here that I showed you, there's a little bit of play. That shaft will actually move about maybe 5 millimeters back and forth. And what I discovered was that on the left side of the platen, where it does the line spacing and the ratcheting, I noticed that that sprocket gear that's fixed to the left side of the platen wasn't fully engaged into these sliding levers here that do the line spacing. And so what I did was, once all the set screws were loose here on the right side of the platen and both knobs removed, what I did is I pulled that shaft all the way to the right as far as it would go, and then I pushed the platen all the way to the left on that shaft. And then I tightened down these 2 screws here on the platen, so the relationship between the platen and that shaft was now fixed. And with the platen pushed all the way to the left, I reinstalled the left platen knob and tightened down its set screw. And having done that, now the platen can't slide back to the right any, and it keeps it fully engaged with these plates here. And then I reinstalled the right platen knob. So that was the first thing, and that got the sprocket here on the left side of the platen a little bit more tightly engaged. Then the real trick to this was this top little bracket that has the little roller on it that rolls onto the teeth of the sprocket and gives you that ratcheting feel. It's adjusted by these 2 little screws, and when you loosen them, this little bracket not only goes left and right, but it goes forward and backwards because the holes for these screws are kind of oval or slotted. And it took me a long time playing with this to get it set right, because this little roller on the end of this bracket has to push both the sprocket down that's on the end of the platen, but it also has to push the little sliding lever that's next to it that does the actual line spacing selection. But after a tedious amount of time adjusting it, doing minute adjustments and retightening these screws and re-loosening them and adjusting them over and over, I finally got it now. We're in the single line spacing where it's at now. The carriage does 2 clicks, and if you put in the 1.5, it does 3 clicks, and you do it in the double, it does 4 clicks. So I have fixed the line spacing problem that I thought I was going to have to live with all along. And it was all about just being emboldened enough and confident enough, even though I didn't have a service manual for this machine, but being confident enough to go in and try to see if I could effect some repair. And again, I think the root cause of it was just the relationship between that inner shaft and the platen, and the fact that the platen had to go a little bit more to the left. So that was one repair that I did. Now, as I was doing further test typing on this machine after I had repaired the line spacing problem, I noticed an interesting problem that not all machines have. Some of them have based on their design. And that has to do with the vertical alignment of the shifted letters, the capital letters that are shifted. And it's common to have problems of the vertical alignment being off between your uppercase and your lowercase. But what's interesting about this machine, and some like it, is there's a separate set of vertical adjustments for your uppercase based on which knob you're using. So there's two shift knobs, right? Left and right shift knob. Each shift knob has its own set of adjustments for the height of the capital and the set down position of the lowercase. And I noticed when I was doing some test typing a while that the capital letters weren't all, some of the capital letters were a little higher than the lowercase, but other capital letters weren't, and it had to do with which shift button I was using for that. And so what I ended up having to do was I pulled off the ribbon cover, and down on, it was the left side that needed to be adjusted, and down here are the set screws for the upper and the lower lowercase and uppercase position, and it's a screw. I really can't show it to you here. It's buried in the machine. It's just to the left of the left ribbon spool, but it's a machine screw that is mounted at a 45-degree angle going down in there with a locking nut on it, and it controls. So this is a carriage shift machine, and it just controls how far up the carriage goes when you shift it. And I just had to readjust that so that both the left and the right side were even. And after having done that, this typewriter types pretty darn good. I was very pleased with the results afterwards. And I don't know if you can even read that, but my results is a very neat typewriter text. This thing types really nice and even. So that was the repair of the Olympia SF. I was encouraged to do this repair, as I said earlier, because of the confidence I gained from having fixed my Smith Corona Silent Super. Again, much thanks to Ted Monk, who has put together this great resource of having the Typewriter Repair Bible. Even though this machine, which is not that common, it doesn't have currently a typewriter repair Bible, but just being emboldened to do these kind of repairs gives you the confidence to go in and try to think about what's this problem, what's causing it, and what can I do to affect an improvement. So I was happy about that. And then last night, actually early this morning, as I was thinking about the video I had made yesterday and about this upcoming video, I had this crazy idea that I needed to write a short story about this typewriter, and I might put this on my blog so you guys can read it, but I'm going to read this short story. Now, I just finished writing this about less than an hour ago. I went down to a local coffee shop and just sat and wrote this off the top of my head. So I hope you guys will bear with me. It's not polished, but it might prove to be entertaining, I hope. And so I'm going to be flipping through these pages, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this. And I've tentatively called this A Fine Mess. I know you're not going to believe this, but I'm banking on it that you do. My life's on the line after all. It's hard to say how this all started, but I'll do my best to explain in the brief time I have left. Just know this up front. Whatever you do, don't get hooked on collecting typewriters. That's how this mess all started for me. Oh, sure, you'll see some sexy little number in a thrift store, tickle its keys, and it'll in turn tickle your fancy. That's how it always starts. Usually a shiny, black, pre-war portable, Remington or Corona, with the round glass keys like a doe-eyed vixen. At first I thought I could control the urge to collect typewriters. After all, there's only so much room in one's house, unless you start selling furniture to make room for more shelves, like I did. No problem, right? Right. Until you wake up alone one morning, cold stale coffee in the pot and a note on the kitchen table, gone to see her mother, not sure when she'll return. Great. What's a fella to do, right? Head out to the nearest thrift store. That's what. It was on a Monday when she left, after a particularly lucky weekend during which I'd hauled in 3 new machines, a Royal, some Japanese portable, and the little Olympia. The first 2 were nothing special. I'd probably fix them up and give them to the school. Mr. Alder's English class loved manual typewriters, even though they weren't officially on the curriculum. He'd somehow figured out how to fit them into the instruction anyway. But that little Olympia was different. It wasn't the oldest in my collection by a long shot, late 50s I figured, but something about it was different. I felt it the very first time I tapped its keys, a tingling in my fingers and shiver up my spine. I figured at the time it must have been the blustery March weather, a cold draft or something. Now I know differently. That Monday, after finding the note, I moped around the house a while, feeling sorry for myself, then decided to hit that thrift store. The little Olympia was on the kitchen table, a test sheet of paper threaded up. I returned after a fruitless search for more machines. Not a single one to be found. Even the old Underwood Model 10 in rusted, decrepit shape at Old Man Nichols' place was gone. Had been there for several years, untouched, and now, poof, gone overnight. Weird. But that tingle in my spine returned the second I inserted the key. Opening the door, I could sense something different. Walking into the kitchen, I froze in my tracks, dropping the sack of carryout on the floor. Hello. Just 5 letters, centered on the page near the top line, neatly imprinted. Damn. Must have been her, some kind of game she's playing. Passive-aggressive, just her M.O. What to do? I sat down and ate my lunch, and not-so-hot pastrami and fries. My mouth was bone dry, and that tingling feeling had returned to my fingers. I popped a beer, took a few pulls, still the tingle. Pushing the lunch aside, I set the Olympia in front of me, snapped the carriage return lever a few times, and placed my fingers on the home row. The feeling of electricity jumping from fingertips to keys like the static from a Tesla coil. I sat and thought. It suddenly all poured out in a torrent of words, the staccato of type slugs against platen echoing off the spider webs in the corner. All the angst that I'd built up over the years, these unspoken thoughts and the suspicions strewn across the page in neatly inked impressions. I yanked out the page in a flourish, then sat guiltily quiet, waiting for my pulse to subside. Finally, I set aside the page, threaded up a fresh one, and headed out to work. I had the mid-shift at the plant, and 2 of the guys were on vacation. I'd worry about her tricks later. It was past midnight when I returned, entering quietly as was my habit, even though the house was now cold and empty. I'd have to scrounge up some dinner somehow. Snapping on the kitchen light, I stood staring into the near-empty fridge, my mind blank, when I suddenly spun around and gazed wide-eyed at the Olympia. I'm not her. Centered on the line near the top of the page, the imprint dark and even. I stood there for what must have been 5 minutes, the refrigerator door wide open, the compressor humming loudly. Damn. I don't need to tell you that I was more than a bit freaked out. I'm a down-to-earth pragmatic fellow, no BS. What's a fella to do? Change the locks? That's what. After all, she's the one who left. That next day, I hit the hardware store on my way to work. Returning home that night, I ignored the Olympia and busied myself with replacing the locks between bites of stale hamburger and pulls of cold beer. Proud of the job I'd done, I walked into the kitchen to wash my hands and noticed the Olympia on the table. Centered near the top of the page, I could see were 3 words. I ignored them and purposefully, meticulously washed my hands, all the while the feeling like someone's watching. Not wanting to let no damn typewriter get the better of me, I slowly dried my hands, purposefully taking my sweet time, then fixed my lunch for the next day. Finally, I sat down at the table, purposefully nonchalant, eventually setting my gaze upon the paper, being cool, calm, collected. Please help me, read the next letters. I felt cold and lightheaded, my mind swirling with confusion, then a shallow emptiness and a queasy feeling in my stomach. I ran to the bathroom and heaved up dinner into the commode. It must have been a half hour later, after showering and cleaning up, the comfort of a robe and flannel PJs, I decided, what do I have to lose? You can't explain everything. Some things remain a mystery, even though we resign ourselves to live with them. That's life. That's what I decided to do, live with it. I'd leave a fresh sheet of paper threaded into the thing every day, then come home to read the new words and carefully compose my response. That's how this whole thing started. We've built up a pretty good relationship, certainly better than the previous one. Oh sure, she eventually called, but I just explained to her that I've moved on. Am I still collecting typewriters, she asked. No, I told her, I'm now a one-machine man. What's she like, she asked. German, I told her, late 50s, curvy yet petite, solidly built. She hung up. I still get the tingling in my fingers and up my spine, just not as much as before. I'm thinking about changing her ribbon, maybe get one of those fancy red and black numbers. I haven't told her yet. But yesterday, I walked by Old Man Nichols' place and there was this sleek little red number in the window. Italian. Not sure what I'm going to do. Damn. Well, that's my little impromptu typewriter collecting short story inspired by the Olympia SF. And no, she hasn't left yet, so I better watch my typewriter collecting. And until next time, you guys have yourselves a great day.